Okay, we're going to hear from you, but I want to, sir, would you tell us your name real quick? What's that? Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson asked, what about the camping ban in Federal Way? Here's what I would say. That we don't have a camping ban. What we're talking about right now is there was a recent decision in the Court of Appeals and federal courts referred to as the Boise decision. And the case in Boise had to deal with, the city in Boise had literally a camping ordinance and had certain things about sleeping outside and certain things. So the ordinance itself was essentially made it illegal for people to be homeless outside. We do not do what Boise does. Boise was arresting people wholesale for being homeless. That's not the policy in the city of Federal Way. So I want to make sure that language matters and how we refer to it really matters. Let me put it to you in these terms, okay? Remember we were talking about the encampments, and we were talking about how we deal with encampments and how we deal with individuals. The Boise decision and what's at issue here does not relate to personal property. So if somebody owns, a private party owns that property, like the property where Steel Lake is, 304th off Pack Highway and 304th, that's actually where there's been a lot of encampment in the northeast section of Pack Highway and that wooded area off to the right if you're northbound. That's all private property. And so the decision and the law about people removing homeless individuals or trespassers on their property is not affected by any of those decisions. Additionally, with the way the city of Federal Way has handled it, there are certain things like parks. Our city parks are governed by certain regulations. We close our parks after dusk. People are no one, regardless of what they're doing, no one's allowed in public parks after dark. And no one is allowed to camp in a public park. It's just not, that's not allowed. And that's not what Boise was about. Boise, what made it illegal with Boise was that they had prohibited camping everywhere outdoors and essentially made the act of being human and being homeless illegal, and they were arresting people. We are not doing that. So what I would say is on public property, there are certain other areas like the Heilbus which are protected properties. They're watersheds or they're protected people where people are not allowed. So that's not allowed there. And so really what we're talking about is situations in which people are in the right of way or they're on public property. And so, we do enforce a situation where, we don't allow people to set up camp in those areas. But we're not arresting our way out of that. That's not the way, that's not the way we do that. And if they are, if we do get a situation where it just gets to a situation like at a park, we had a situation where people were at a park by a school, we just have to move people along. So that's where we're at. But it's important that we make sure that the public property and people's private property are protected. But we are not arresting our way out of this. Yes? Yes. Well, we passed a moratorium to make sure that, and maybe we could just pass it around when people, instead of having come up to the microphone. I think people are probably more comfortable doing that. Thank you very much, Thomas. Rose, you want to, here, why don't you use this? Well, you want to ask your question again?
A while ago, the mayor mentioned a moratorium on storage units, self-storage units.
Right.
But I've noticed there are a lot of them in Federal Way being built and already built. So what's going on?
So what happened was in the queue or in the application, we saw, well, not applications, but pre-applications, we saw there are quite a number of them. So what we wanted to do is make sure the council and the city staff wanted to make sure that we had our regulations in place to make sure that our zoning was right, to make sure we weren't just sort of overwrought or overcome with these storage units. But at some point, if it's zoned for it, if it's business and it's commercial, there's not a lot we can do if it's zoned a particular way. Okay. Okay.
Billy Paddock wants to know, she read about or heard about a winery coming to Federal Way, and we haven't heard anything else about it. Does it exist? Where is it? Stuff like that. That's her question.
Well, I think, I recently heard from them. I think they're working on certain things. I think they'd have some permitting that they've got to do. There's all kinds of things. We changed the interim zoning for them. I think they had a tasting room for a while, but I think they're working their way through the code process. You're welcome.
Debbie.
Yes.
Hi, Mayor. A couple of questions. I think in light of the documentary that was done on Seattle is Dying, also hearing, almost daily of issues in the news with Seattle. Recently heard there was a new HIV outbreak because of the used needles and sharing of drugs. My question to you is, in the City Council, is what are you guys doing to assure that we don't become another Seattle?
Well, I can tell you right now, what we were just talking about with this gentleman is all the steps we're taking about these camp cleanups, be it on public property, private property, that's the exact opposite of what's happening in Seattle. We are not going to let that happen in our city. I used to I was a King County prosecutor for 16 years. I was a city prosecutor for 3 years before that. So I was a 19-year career prosecutor. What is being allowed to happen at our King County courthouse and in that grass area and along the streets is criminal. It is absolutely outrageous. And that is never going to happen in the city of Federal Way. So I watched that too, and I was completely disgusted. So thank you. I was talking about this, and it's actually, Debbie, you bring up a really good point. And essentially what we're talking about is there is a social compact, right? We come together as a civilization. This is the closest political entity to you, but you've got, the county, the state, the federal, but there is a public compact, right? We agree in civilization not to allow certain things. We allow, and I think that we all understand that urinating and defecating in public on our sidewalks, in our public parks, is not allowed and not going to be tolerated, period. Dealing drugs out in the open or allowing the felonious transactions of narcotics in our streets should not be allowed, ever. And as a father of an 11-year-old, that's where I'm at. As a former prosecutor, as a citizen. So I am beside me. I have no idea what in the world the leaders in Seattle are up to in regard to their policy pursuits, their refusal to prosecute, even these small level. When I first started at the King County Prosecutor's Office in 1998, I was prosecuting deliveries of cocaine and heroin that were probably half the size of this fingernail, and we're talking. I sent people to prison for 10 years with a park zone or a school enhancement zone. You'd add a 24 months with the school zone, and we sent people down 24. 24. That's 24 months on top of 24. 4 years of prison for drug delivery. Yeah, we came at it hard. That was norm mailing. That was the way it was. And now, the way it is now, they're not prosecuting in King County unless it's either a gram or 3 grams or whatever it is this week. It's outrageous. You cannot allow the standards of our community to fall to the point where this free flow of drug activity and homelessness and camping in the park next to the courthouse is allowed. It's a failure by their leadership, and it's not going to happen here. Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to happen here. So the answer is we don't do that. In fact, actually, they wanted me to. I'll get you next. There was a question. Oh, sorry. She's next, and then we'll go there. So there was another show that you guys should probably watch, all about the drug epidemic in King County, and I believe it was a Frontline, and it was a Frontline about the drug epidemic, and it really focused on Seattle. My wife and I were watching it, and at one point, they were talking about this program that they were doing where they weren't arresting people for using drugs and having drugs. And they profiled like 4 or 5 people, and it was all in the Puget Sound area. And at one point, this young woman who is dealing with, in the throes of addiction, is literally dying from pneumonia on the streets. And my wife and I just looked at each other. We stopped the video, and we just said, she needs to be arrested for her own good, because she needs drug treatment, she needs accountability, and I think actually ultimately that's what the system owes human beings in our social compact. And so, yeah, this humanity, or being humane about not prosecuting people for drug activity, I don't think is humane at all. Allowing your neighbor to sleep in that area where we were talking about before, and in these heroin injection site camps. That's not humane. If somebody I loved were in one of these camps, I would be there every day to drag them out of that camp. So anyway, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi there. I have a pretty long history with Federal Way. I actually worked on the Sears store when it was being built, and there was nothing else here.
Right.
And I have to tell you that Federal Way is really looking good. And I came to this meeting for two reasons, same as her, to make sure that you guys were allowing the police to do their job and arrest drug dealers and stuff, to keep what's happening in Seattle from happening here. And I want to plug something else that's going to go on in Federal Way on June 21st. It's actually the first annual Make Music Day.
Oh, that's right.
Which is a worldwide movement.
Right.
But we actually are having an arm of it here, and you're going to kick it off.
That's right.
And
That's
I'm
right.
going to introduce you.
Oh, very good. I look forward to it. It's going to be in Town Square Park.
Town Square Park, June the 21st. It's an all-day thing. Everybody's invited. It's all free. Everybody come, make music.
And I should say,
Make music Federal Way.
I should say that I think what is so disturbing about what happens in Seattle is just that whether it's on a sidewalk or at a park, as I went to go find, a good friend of mine just got sworn in as a judge. She's going to be an awesome judge. And I went to go see her swearing in. It was just last week. So I drove up there, parked the car, but as I was getting up there to park in that new garage, they used to call it the Goat Hill Garage because you have to be a goat to climb up this hill. And I was climbing up, Bob knows what I mean, remember the old Goat Hill parking lot? And I went there, and as I was going under this bridge, tent after tent after tent after tent on the sidewalk. And I'm like, man, that is not, we've got to find places. Now, these are human beings. These are people's sons, daughters, mothers, fathers. I want to tell you, I've got lots of compassion for them. We need to make sure that we help them and give them a hand up. And actually, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we're going to be talking about, it's not all, the goal here and the idea is not to arrest these people out of it, but you arrest people for illegal conduct. But there are lots of treatments. There's lots of things we can do as a community. I've got one more, and then we'll go back to you, Allison. All right, I think you had a comment. Do you have a? Oh, you've got it, and then we got to get over here.
Hi, Jesse. So I'm actually here in District 4. My backyard is literally Dash Point State Park.
Oh, great.
Yes, the homeless thing is a problem. I've heard a lot, and you just kind of touched on some of what I was getting to, but you said a lot about cleaning up the camps and things.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit to what the alternatives are and how we're trying to help people as the City of Federal Way to not have to be in that situation? Because, my wife runs at 6 o'clock in the morning in Dash Point State Park.
Yeah.
And she actually encountered people that, when it was raining here a whole bunch, right there a quarter mile into the park, that were camping. And that's not okay.
Right.
But at the same time, they were probably trying to get away from the rain and, so, I mean, this is a human problem, right? And it's national.
Well,
so what is Federal Way doing to try to help them get opportunities to get out of the homeless situation, not just clean up the camps?
I agree, because there's, most of the camps that we encounter, whether they're public or private, they're abandoned. Maybe they've got one or two stragglers that are there. So it's not like we're arresting a rat. But when we do come into contact with folks, we have a packet that we give them. There's all kinds of shelters and locations for people to get assistance. There's meal programs. One of the main reasons why I gathered those 70 people at City Hall recently was we've got a very generous, giving, loving community. And a lot of churches, a lot of nonprofit groups that are giving meals and different things, but there's a lack of coordination between that, and that's one of the key things is there are shower programs, there are dinner programs, there are all kinds of things. In fact, Bob Regner and I and Olivia and some of the mayor staff, we were actually at a church and we were doing a meal service at a local church. Just recently it was profiled in the paper. But there are all kinds of churches and organizations. So the answer is, number one, there are resources out there right now. There are good groups doing good work out there to provide that. So we need to, that's the first thing, is just to make sure that we're coordinating and giving people that information. When we come into contact with folks, we do give them contact information for local shelters. One of the really important things that happened 4 years ago, 4 years, actually 4 years and 6 months ago now, was the idea about the day center. And I don't know if you guys have heard much about the day center. I think that's really one of the great successes of this community. When I met with the governor, I met with U.S. Senator Patty Murray, I talked with them about the success, about the day center, giving people a shower, a hot meal, be able to clean their clothes. You know, it's such a desperate and frightening situation to be homeless. And once you're in that situation, how are you going to climb out of that? You can't do it with your clothes are dirty if you don't have can't get a resume, can't make some phone calls or use a computer, get a mailbox. The day center is down there on 13th, sort of by Joe's Deli. That has been a tremendous success in this community. And that has actually been, staffed by Catholic Community Services and a conglomeration of local churches and some staffing that was city money of $100,000 to help them get up and running. And that's been a great success, because what you really have to think about is you can't go from living in a tent in the woods to getting an apartment and getting your first, last, and damage deposit. That's not going to happen. So you really do need that continuity. There's a continuum, if you will. There's an emergency shelter. I'll start over here for you guys. There's emergency shelter for dangerous weather, and then there's a more intermediate care, and then there's transitional housing, and it's a continuum. You think about getting people out of that. One of the exciting things that's happening is Fusion, just a great organization in this community, originally founded by Peggy Laporte, is starting. They're in the process of creating a shelter off Pack Highway, right around just south of where the Econo Lodge is, right Shag Housing and the mailbox on Pack Highway. And that's going to be somewhere in that initial continuum for families. So that's, I think, making sure that we provide those resources. So I think that we just need to come together as a community. That's why I gathered all the faith-based groups. We provide hundreds of thousands of dollars. As your city, we provide hundreds of thousands of dollars every year for assistance to people, whether it's rental assistance or homeless prevention services, and pass-throughs on federal grants. So a lot of your citizens, a lot of your neighbors work on human services grants. So there's a lot of money that's going out, and so really it's about identifying how those individuals can get hooked up. But I do have to tell you, there are, and this is the hard reality, there are a lot of people that are contacted that don't want to come out of the woods. They don't. But they're not the enemy. That's just reality, and we need to deal. I'm a big believer in being, in being truthful and dealing with the reality on the ground. That's the reality. And where people go, if they're not allowed to be somewhere where they go, as harsh as this may sound, it's not the responsibility of the government. The responsibility of the government is to run the government. And I really feel strongly about this, that it's not our responsibility. People don't become our responsibility simply because they decide to plop a tent on city property. That doesn't transfer. Never in the course of human history has someone's care been derived from where they pop a tent. And so so we just need to deal honestly, directly, and that's what's going to help people. And one of the things I say all the time is comfort is the enemy of change. And if you make things too comfortable, the city of Seattle can never spend their way out of this. They can throw, what is it, $60, $90 million, whatever the figure is a year, it'll never be enough, ever. Because comfort is the enemy of change. The more you give, the more it will take. You've got to be honest with people and deal directly with them. And that's what we need to do as a community. You got a question? Oh, thank you.
Okay, so earlier, going back to the things that we don't tolerate here in Federal Way.
Right.
We don't tolerate it, but it's happening. I'm seeing it, I'm going to say it, public defecating and open paraphernalia.
Right.
In malls, at bus stops, by school property. I mean, it's happening. So what can the citizens do? I know our police force can only do so much.
Right.
What can we do as citizens to address this?
Well, if you see a particular location that is a cause for concern, you email me, you email your city council people. We got a great city council, you guys. They're really engaged, great great community partners. If you know somebody on the city council, if you've got contact information with the police, email me. If we've got a particular hot spot or location, I don't know if Pat Pomeroy is here, the president of Twin Lakes, but just recently, actually, I drove around with Pat, probably about 2 months ago, and we looked at all the suspected drug houses or marijuana houses all over Twin Lakes. And we looked at all those locations, and we followed those, and we're following up on every one of those leads and indications of a organized crime element that is buying up houses. So I'm going to shear off here on another side issue. But in Twin Lakes, there were about 30 houses that were being used in a methodical manner by organized crime to grow marijuana in these houses. And they had these individuals called tenders that were tending to the crops. We have been systematically taking those apart, arresting people, seizing those houses, in the process of seizing those houses. But that is not going to be allowed to stand. But every piece of information that we have is helpful. If we know about it, we can do something about it. If we don't know something about it, we can't do anything. So, misdemeanor, I actually don't believe, I'm a big proponent of the broken windows theory. The Rudy Giuliani, broken, remember how New York 35 years ago was a mess, and it wasn't until they actually really drilled down and made sure that they addressed all these types of crimes that it really turned it around. And you could walk around New York City without being fearful of being mugged or having crime occur right in front of you. So we just need to be really vigilant. We don't give an inch on crime. There is no directive at the City of Federal Way that we don't prosecute misdemeanor thefts or whatever the crime is, and that's why we said no firmly to this worst public policy idea I've ever heard of in my life, which is safe injection sites. That'll never happen. I was really proud of the City Council with my approval as well that we would never allow safe injection sites to occur in the City of Federal Way. So you just have to send that consistent message that if we believe crime is occurring, we're on it. And we do need an officer to respond though. So, and then I think Ann, we're going to get to you. Let's here. Can
I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I just want to show my appreciation to the officers in our city for all they do.
Yeah, thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause. So I've got Allison right there, and then we're going to get to Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. I would caution you saying things like small amounts of drugs should turn into arrests where we force people into treatment because people still have human rights that we need to respect. I have two questions. Number one, there's a lack of education, I feel, in our community from what I see, what I hear, and I'm very active in our community, about how a lot of homelessness stems from initially mental health issues, and then mental health turns into drug problems. Drug problems turns into homelessness, unfortunately. It's a very clear path. A lot of people don't seem to get it. I don't care whether you get it, it's the reality. This is my field of work. But what are we doing to encourage mental health and drug treatment to come to Federal Way? That's one of my question. Go.
Okay, so what I would say is, you guys would be really surprised. You may be surprised to hear this. The second biggest mental health ward in the state of Washington is the King County Jail on the 7th floor. And that, if you just let that soak in for a moment, that is truly a travesty, that you've got individuals that are, attempting to, soothe themselves and treat themselves. You've got this co-occurrence of drug abuse and drug and alcohol abuse with mental health. And sometimes it's very difficult to untether those two. But they become very apparent. In all the cases that I handled, it became very apparent rapidly when mental health was a major issue. So where we encounter people in the criminal justice system, or whether in whatever it is, we need to make sure that we get them the kind of mental health treatment. Actually, Valley Cities, which is one of the referral organizations in this area, is actually headquartered right next to the City of Federal Way City Hall. And so, where that's possible, I think that's absolutely right. But what we don't do is we don't go into camps and then order people to go to treatment. I guess there's a piece there. You talk about human liberty. We are very focused on that and making sure that there is treatment available. Oftentimes what happens is people who are engaged in the criminal justice system have mental health court or have mental health conditions imposed upon them. We can't make people do that, and oftentimes if we're not directly engaged at that level, we wouldn't know that they've got a mental health issue. We don't know until it manifests.
Well, my question is, how are you encouraging more treatment centers and more drug and alcohol support here? Because Valley Cities is almost maxed out.
It is.
So at capacity. So we need more support in our community. So what are we doing to get that support is my question.
Directly across the street, actually, from where the day center is another mental health facility for treatment for people. And that's actually, it came in as a situation where people can get mental health treatment. It's actually a facility right here in the city of Federal Way. So I think there are some resources out there, but once again, you don't really encounter that on a day-to-day basis. We're not necessarily a service provider for services. We do streets and parks and human services. We give grants to other organizations, and those grants provide the direct provider of services. And so I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. You have that co-occurrence, and it's really sad. Yeah.
A second part of my question is actually about retaining businesses that are
Yeah.
going to be affected by sound transit.
Right.
I know specifically Deseret has been one that's been mentioned a lot lately, has been telling clients that they're having to leave because of sound transit and they don't think that they can stay here. And I'm wondering what the city is doing to potentially relocate businesses or help them or encourage them to stay. Are we even fighting for these businesses?
We are. There's been a great deal of communication with area businesses to ensure, whether it's, Red Robin and Azteca and Deseret and Arco closed sooner than we thought. They cut a deal with Sound Transit and just closed their doors. Actually, Sound Transit doesn't even own Denny's yet, but they just shut their doors as soon as they came to close to a deal. And so, but we are engaging with a lot of these folks to ensure that we don't have that sort of leakage, if you will. Jet Chevrolet is one of the locations where, down at 348th, it's one of the locations where the light rail could come in, and I'm not sure that's going to be the site because I think it's too congested at that exact location, but we've had constant communication. Tim Johnson, I always kid that our economic director, Tim Johnson, is the hardest working man in government because he's on it all the time, and just making sure that we're communicating with him and making sure that we're communicating that we want their business and we want them to stay. With Deseret, there's a situation in which we want to do, 10 years ago, we had a consultant, around 10 years ago when I was on the city council, we had a consultant come and talk with us about downtown economic development. And they were talking about key indicia of when a downtown dies. And I'm going to tell you why we did all of the tens of millions of dollars that's being invested for you with Town Square Park, the Performing Arts and Event Center, the staircase. That is an injection of capital to save our downtown. If you let your downtown die, the rest of the town will. And that is something that was concerning as a homeowner, as somebody who lives here, as somebody who's raising a son. I was watching this very carefully. There was a special in the Mirror back in April of 2013 when I was trying to figure out if I was going to run for mayor or not, and I saw the front page about our downtown filled with cyclone fencing and mattresses and about what was happening. And if you allow de-investment on that level and get that kind of blight in your town, it'll be like a rotten core to an apple. It'll spread. And then your whole town will go down the tubes. And so I bring up the Deseret for one important reason, is that when we were talking about that, they said that the drop-off at a downtown is precipitous. It happens almost overnight before you realize it. One of the key indicia, pawn stores and things like pawn stores popping up in your downtown core. And that's why back then, why we took a look at secondhand stores, that we're trying to make sure that what we're building in our downtown and the investments that we want to see in our downtown are not the kinds of things that are going to indicate blight and distress. And so Deseret's a great industry. They do a lot of good things. But I'm confident. We've reached out to them, and we're going to continue to work with them to get them to another site, hopefully in Federal Way. But it's that downtown core that's a piece of it. Ask a lawyer a simple question, you get a long answer. Go ahead.
Shoplifting.
Yeah.
Seems like a minor crime, but I live by Twin Lakes where all the stores are, and the fact that the addicts know that they can go into the stores, steal what they want with no consequences, it's breeding more people in that area.
Right.
Are the police, and I have no problem, I believe that the businesses do have a responsibility if they need to provide security. And we sort of got on the Safeway on 320th about that
Right.
last year, and I have no problem going to the corporate offices of Kroger and Safeway to encourage them to provide security, but is our police force responding if a store calls about a shoplifter? Because I keep hearing that they're not.
So, a couple things. We respond to everything that we're called to. Everything that we are called to, but I want to explain something just for a moment. So we're part of Valleycom, Valley Communications. It's your 911. If any of us picked up the phone right now and called 911, or if you went home here in Federal Way and called 911, there's a place on 272nd up the hill. If you take 272nd, it is our Valley Communications for Federal Way, Kent, Auburn, Renton, Tukwila. That's where every 911 call goes. So in there, the control room, about 2/3 the size of this room, and state of the art. They have, for Federal Way, about 2 or 3 operators at any one moment. Those individuals, they've got 1 for fire, 2 for police. I'm on the board, I have been since I've been mayor. What they do, the 911 operators at Valleycom, they place priorities on calls. So at any one time, they will see where they know where all the officers are in real time on the map, and then they'll get the call in, and they'll get a call for a robbery or a shoplift or whatever it is. And then they have to calculate that if it's a domestic violence call, you've got to have 2 officers there because our officers are 1 person per car. So they've got to make sure they've got 2 people there. So what I say all this because we respond to every call that we are priority to, or that we are sent to by Valleycom. So we're not giving up our autonomy to Valleycom, but they dispatch these resources. And so oftentimes, you guys in the middle of the night, I'm sure you've heard all the sirens or the helicopters. Every once in a while you'll hear the guy that does Guardian 1 lives in Browns Point. I had to ask the chief about this. Why am I always hearing helicopters? He says the guy that does Guardian 1, the King County Sheriff's Office, lives over in Browns Point. So we are dispatched by Valleycom to particular locations. So oftentimes what you'll see is like 4 or 5 police officers respond. If there's a robbery, and there have been a rash of robberies, and one of the things that Kyle, and I don't know if Kyle got too far into it, what did not go down last year was robberies. Robberies went up 38%. That's absolutely unacceptable. And I've had dozens of conversations with the chief about that. So we are narrowing in. I'm going to give you a real answer here. We are focusing like a laser beam on robberies, violent crime, and so when we get a situation like that, we're trying to track somebody, we'll get a canine dog. If our canine dog is not on duty, we'll get one from another jurisdiction. We're going to catch those guys. We've had really good success. In fact, actually, remember on Federal Way Community Watch, just like last week, there was a robbery, the purse snatch at Rite Aid. There was a bunch of them. One that happened at Winco. So I hear about all these. And I hear every crime that happens in Federal Way, if it's a major crime, I hear about immediately. So there was a situation in which we were having these individuals target women in parking lots at stores, one at the Rite Aid, one at the Winco, and there were several others in Seattle. What they do is, and you just really need to have situational awareness. So they unlock their door, they're in the process of getting out of their car, and either they're grabbing it, it's in the process of getting out of their car, and they're approached by either, usually one male, and that pushes them down, grabs the purse, and takes off. Now that happened 3 times, or at least twice in the city of Federal Way a week ago. There are 2 people in custody now that we have been able to locate, and it was a ring of individuals, and that was happening around the Puget Sound. They had sort of figured out this novel way to commit these robberies by purse snatching or women getting out of cars. So right now there are 2 people in custody for those crimes. So, what we're doing right now is we're making sure that, in answer to your question about how crimes are dispatched, if we get a robbery call, that's going to take more officers in that area. If we have a burglary call, an active burglary call, we're going to bring some more officers. But eventually, we should respond, and we will respond. But we are not responding. I mean, it's not a situation in which we're saying this is not a serious crime. Hey, I spent a whole day of my life once prosecuting the theft of 1 pack of cigarettes. So when I was in Renton Municipal Court about 20 years ago. And so, it happened. So I can tell you that and this is actually what was profiled in that show in Seattle. Remember how many people saw that show, Seattle's Dying? One of the things I found that was absolutely interesting or fascinating was the drugstore, Bartell's, and right in the downtown. And people are walking in there brazenly, filling up their arms and walking out. When people know they can do that, the social order breaks down, and that's
They're
not gonna
doing it
happen.
here. They are doing it here.
Okay, well, that's where?
Parks, are you back there?
Could you say it again?
Every store, every store. Safeway, Rite Aid, somebody was telling me about Rite Aid the other day. Lowe's is particularly bad because they steal the power tools, and all of the employees are told not to stop them because it's too dangerous.
Kyle? So this is, I've heard about periodic meetings, but we have not maybe what we need to do is
On a
gather the
regular
retailers together.
basis.
Kyle, did you hear all that? Okay.
And I do think it leads to they don't move on because they have a steady income. I mean,
Yeah.
they know they can walk out with it and
Yes,
steal
we are
it.
aware of that, and it ticks us off too. There used to be a day when those stores, particularly Lowe's and large stores like that, had security people who would stop them as they're leaving. More and more and more stores have become more afraid of stopping somebody than losing their property, and they have made policy choices to let the stuff walk out the door. And so what commonly, to back up and answer, do we go to shoplifts? Yes, we do. Here's often how that goes. Let them walk. This is the company policy. Shh, let him walk. Don't get in his way. Shh, out they go. Quick, call 911. There goes the guy. I mean, he's long off the property by the time we get there 5 minutes later. That is often how that goes. Now, if we're in the parking lot when the guy comes out, if the manager chased him out and said, that guy's got a chainsaw, hopefully it's not plugged in. Hopefully there's no gasoline in it yet. But yes, we will stop them, we will detain them, we will prosecute them, we will do all of that. But it has to be a combination of the community, and in this case, store owners, a combination of the community being willing to stand up to it and get the police there in time to matter. But we definitely go when we're dispatched. Yeah.
But I wanted to give you an idea of the dispatch priorities. But let me, in regard to that, and you bring up a really good point. And actually, if this is happening on wide scale, if you guys are, because there used to be an officer or two at Fred Meyer. Did we discontinue that contract or did they?
That's entirely up to Fred Meyer. The one on 21st Southwest.
Yeah.
Fred Meyer was paying us to be there certain hours of the day for a certain period of time, and we were there doing that for several months. And then different management came in and ended it. And so, it's now, instead of being present, and that had quite a significant deterrent, as you would imagine. New management comes in, they do a cost-benefit analysis, they say it's costing us too much, we've scared people off, let's not do it anymore. And now, they call 911 and they wait for the next available police officer to come, the rotation that we're talking about. And by then, so a shoplift, whether it's $100 or $400, the shoplift is lower in priority compared to domestic violence. If there's a person whose physical safety is in danger, we go to those first. So yeah, a lot of those where it looks like the police are not responding, we're getting there way too late to matter. Yes, and it's frustrating to all of us.
So, this actually really begs the question about maybe what we need to do is gather, there's a good input, maybe we need to gather the major retailers in town and talk about, maybe putting some steel in their spine and making sure that we're working together.
I don't
about-
think those policies are at the city, at the level of the individual stores.
It's corporate.
So the email campaign needs to come from us, the citizens, to Kroger and Safeway and say, we don't feel safe in your store anymore.
Right.
You need to hire security. I've done it before. I'll do it again.
Well, I can tell you that well, thank you. I frequent the stores in our community, and I haven't necessarily seen that. I'm sure it sounds like you guys all have seen it, and so, but I do think we need to start at that level. We started at that level with the shopping cart ordinance, and we engaged local management. And Safeway is a local regional company. I think we just need to engage with them. If we need to go to the higher level, there was actually a point in which Safeway wasn't letting us collect food for the days of concern and that kind of thing, and we had to take that up the chain in regard to, hey, why are you doing this? What's going on? So it sounds like we need to do that. So that's a really good suggestion. Yeah. Maybe it just takes the mayor to reach out to some of these people, go up the chain at Fred Meyer, go up the chain at Safeway. That's a really good suggestion. I really appreciate it. So that's what we'll do. Yes. Oh, yes. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Devin Whitaker. I live about 2 blocks up. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
I live about 2 blocks away. I've been working in the behavioral health field for almost a decade now. And a lot of what's being talked about with the homeless population and the shoplifting is a symptom. And my question to you is, what are we doing to treat the root of the problem by helping our kids? Whether that's providing more drug and alcohol counselors in every school, mental health counselors in every school. I guess my question to you would be, what type of money is the city providing, either tax funded or grant funded, to help increase services for our youth?
Well, we work really closely with the schools. I think, the schools have, 21,000 young students in them. I don't necessarily, we're not going to give drug and alcohol treatment to anybody that, that doesn't appear that they need it. I think there's a lot of awareness, campaigns that can happen. I think that there used to be the DARE program in the local schools. I think that's probably what you're talking about, and making sure that, we do have school resource officers at the junior high and the high school, and making sure that we're engaging with individuals. But at this point, I'm not sure we're really throwing a lot of money at the schools with regard to those issues. I think the schools need to address that, and we're handling the city issues. I hear what you're saying, though, because it is important, and this is why the investment in infrastructure and why the school district, we are very, very, very fortunate now that our school district is in the position it's in. Dr. Tammy Campbell does a tremendous job. You've got a great school board. I've noticed, since I've been mayor, that our school board and our management, the leadership of the school district is actually just phenomenal, and I think they're really engaged on these. I think you could probably see more engagement. I think ultimately what you're referring to is the prior engagement that used to occur with the DARE program. And I'll talk to the chief about what we can do to get, because I talk to my little guy about that all the time. He's 11 and he's turning 12, and I talk to him all the time about what to really watch for in these areas, and start preparing this young guy for what's ahead and the temptations that will naturally fall into his lap. Now, that's a parent responsibility and a school responsibility. I'm not quite sure where we can, unless we engage with our police folks.
So more specifically to what I was speaking about is city funding for prevention methods, whether that's the school or parent problem. It is what it is, but I know other cities are providing that funding to have more mental health counselors, more drug and alcohol counselors within the school. Because if you go into a school and ask these city-funded positions, are they overworked? Do they need to see more kids? They're going to tell you, I'm overworked, I don't have time to see enough kids. It's either with drug and alcohol use, mental health issues, truancy issues, and these are all precursors, like the gal that was talking earlier, that is precursors to this homelessness problem. So I think It's incredible that the police officers are doing such a great job of putting a damper on the crime, and we're cleaning up the city, but what are we doing to make
Right.
sure that's not a continuation, so we're just throwing money at a problem.
Yeah, and we do actually, you want to talk about what some of the stuff we're doing at the city? And go ahead. She may be able to answer some of this, so go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I want to thank the city because you graciously, a couple years ago, decided to take some of your human services funding and do a parallel application process to open it up for grassroots organizations to be able to provide some funding. And one of them was through the Federal Way Youth Action Team to fund the Youth Employment Readiness Program.
Yes, network. So I was going to talk about that, but I saw her sitting there, so that's why I wanted
And
her
so the Youth Employment Readiness Program happens at Federal Way High School, Decatur, Todd Beamer, and Todd Jefferson High School. And it's allowing high school students, 16 and up, who have multiple barriers to employment to go through a very extensive employment training program to prepare them for and to connect them and secure summer employment, right? So these are youth who maybe have some mental health challenges or physical challenges, or may have had involvement in the juvenile justice system, may have a unstable housing environment, et cetera, multiple barriers. So it could be a variety of things, right? It could be a language issue. And so just yesterday at Todd Beamer High School, we had over, I stopped counting at 40, but there were more youth who came. From 1:30 to 3:30, we had those youth coming in and meeting with various employers. Lowe's was there, Sub-Zero was there, McDonald's was there, Firestone Tire was there, the retirement home, Village Green, Twin Lakes Golf. Tons of businesses were there who hire our youth. And we asked the question, don't just interview them, hire them, or set up interviews. And we were helping youth fill out job applications and turning them in. And I'm happy to report at least 2/3 of those youth either have interviews, 2 walked away with a job in hand, right? And these are youth who, without that training, would not be in a position. I mean, we worked on, give me your 60-second sell, your resume, et cetera. So that's just the beginning. It's a pilot program. We're going to continue doing this. But the point is that we would not have been able to extend it. Last year it was just for 25 youth. This year it was for 100 youth because we got a grant from the city of Federal Way for $5,000. And it's good this year, and we'll do it again next year.
So that's when I pop in and said, yeah, what she said. So thank you. So yeah, that's exactly right. And when we had remember when we had the homicides 3 years ago, one of the things that came out of it was the Violence Prevention Steering Committee and the Coalition. And that steering committee came out with a number of recommendations, and we're working with those right now. And part of that has to do with making sure that we're engaging with the youth. There were like 10 recommendations. So I think youth engagement is absolutely spot on. Yes. Okay. Okay, great. Mr. Principal, did you want to say a word? Come on up, please. Thank you for coming. Let's give the principal a big round of applause.
I actually was trying to get, we do have a school board member here, Lakeisha Phillips. She's not only an outstanding school board member, she's also an outstanding parent here. So I do want to recognize her. I do have a couple of staff members that are over here that were just recognized by the school board for outstanding services over on the side here. So there's Courtney and Patty, and I don't know where Amy went, but there are 3 of them there. Thank you for coming to Green Gables Elementary. I am the new principal here at Green Gables. I was 9 years over at Rainier View. Prior to that, I was 6 years over at Mirror Lake. Prior to that, I was 4 years at Silver Lake. So I'm invested in the community here, and my mission here is to really get engaged with this community here at Green Gables. But that's all I'll say. Thank you, Jim.
All right. Thank you so much for your work. Okay, was there another question? Yeah, yes. Over here. Do we have who's got the microphone? Oh, were you up? Go ahead.
I don't know, I thought I saw you pointing at someone else first.
That's okay.
Yeah?
You've got the microphone.
Okay. Well, I just like to say, that was Kent Cross, right? You're kind of well known around town. You have a good reputation as a principal, so.
That's great.
And I just like to say, I'm going to say something that might be kind of negative, so I want to just bridge on that I think it's fabulous what we're doing in our community to wrap around the youth with so many supports. I also want to ask, I guess, it's such a negative thing in the sense that we've got some negative things going on in our community that we need to prevent our youth from having access to. And so, for example, there's a couple going up and down the I-5 corridor right now with they stole a pad of prescriptions, and they're filling them in all the towns along the I-5 corridor, and they're getting them into high schools. The oxycodone are getting into high schools. They got this oxycodone into Tenino High School. This was on Q13 Fox Crime Stoppers. So check it out. This was a posting yesterday.
Okay.
So I want to bring this to your awareness.
Okay, thank you.
I think we really, as a city, need to coordinate with supports, which are wonderful, but also with our police force protecting our city from this kind of thing coming into our city. We need to coordinate with our pharmacies, you
Right.
know, everything. All of us need to work together.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that to you.
Not
as
at all.
well.
And that wasn't negative at all. That's actually just a very important.
I know, it's just
I'll
such
talk
a
to-
dark topic, and I hate to
Well,
follow
that's-
up with something so dark after such a great thing that she had to say.
That's really
So,
where.
Sorry.
That's really where this whole thing came out about this opioid bow wave. It really began as a result. That's what this Nightline was about, and I don't know how much research you guys are familiar with, but it was about abuse of prescription medication, prescribed by doctors with these opioids, that then when those prescriptions ran out, what people eventually did is they turned to heroin, which was a cheaper and easier accessible opioid, and that is what's just absolutely, we've gone over, crossed over the continental shelf and just dropped into deep water that's why you see this tremendous impact, this huge bow wave from this opioid explosion. That's why, there's been a lot of litigation in regard to opioids and their overprescription, and that's really what is causing a huge explosion of homelessness and this desperation in our country, in our region, and locally as well. So that's really at the core root, and that it is important. I think what my friend Allison over here was talking about. These are good. Is friend too strong of a word? Okay, so the. I even throw that in, even though you're wearing a San Francisco 49ers shirt. But okay. So what I would say though is that yes, they are human beings, but really we really need to get that to the core. A lot of this criminal activity, a lot of this camping and homelessness, at the core of it, it's drug and alcohol abuse. Somewhat of it is masking mental health issues, but a lot of it is this explosion of the opioid abuse. And that's what's, the economy has, if you think about this, if you think about all this camping and all this stuff that's going on, this isn't like the 20s in which we've got double-digit inflation and we've got, the economy is so good, we have a difficult time finding qualified engineers because they're taken, right? The economy is so hot and the unemployment is so low. This is not, people are not camping because it's an economic thing. People are not homeless because, in large part, because of the economy. They're doing it because they've got themselves in this situation, in large part, probably because of mental health, but a lot of it because of these opioid addiction and a lot of these things. And so we need to get to the core of that, but they need to get to the core of it as well, and we need to help them get there. We had some comments back there.
I'm just going to say one more thing. If you haven't read the book called Dreamland, it explains how we got here. And so that's all I'm going to say.
There's another really good book called Chasing the Scream, and that is a King County Superior Court judge provided that book, absolutely fascinating, about the history of drug prosecutions in the country. Okay, do we have another? Yes.
My name's Yolanda Robbins, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Officer Haglin and Officer Year. They're the ones that are in charge of the encampments, and they have a lot of work, and they actually have done a great job over by the Sherwood Forest Elementary School.
Yeah.
And I think in all reality, we all care about our community, and I know the city's doing everything possible to help us out, but we pretty much have to be ears and eyes for them, and we just got to be persistent. I think it's like we just can't complain and not do anything about it. I mean, I try in my neighborhood to get as many people involved. You know, you're always going to have the ones that are going to be the leaders and the other ones that are just going to be the followers. But you got to have persistence. And I mean, it's either them or us. So that's all I have to say.
And that's what that gentleman, yeah, thank you. Let's give her a big round of applause. But that's what the gentleman was talking about in the back, about making sure that when you've got people that maybe not thinking about this, but they are not prepared for being confronted with those drugs. And I talk to my son about this all the time. I said, about, being a former prosecutor, about don't get into a car with somebody you think is, ever, when you get into high school, that you think has been drinking. Don't hang around with people that are using drugs. They are not your friends. And so we really need to prepare our young people, because it's those decisions that they make at critical times in their life that derail them. And that's really, it starts a series of one bad decision, and next thing you know, they're in this chemical dependency spiral. Yes?
Yes, my name's Joanne Sacido, and I drive down 320th a lot by the Twin Lakes Golf Course, and I wondered who was responsible for the sidewalks. There's moss growing on them, and it's not very safe.
Are you talking about the big bend as you go around after you pass the Twin? If you're heading toward the freeway, and you go past the Twin Lakes Golf and Country Club, where you take that big kind of power corner? Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say, wherever the sidewalks are, we're responsible for the sidewalks. And actually, if the legal counsel was here, actually, EJ may, with regard to like snow in front of your house, people, I think the law is that if you've got a sidewalk in front of your house, you're responsible to clean that off.
Right.
Where you've got a major thoroughfare like that, the golf course owns that property. You've got that line of trees, and you could argue on one hand that perhaps the golf and country club should keep that, but on a thoroughfare like that, EJ, can you come up here and help us? Help me answer this. Exactly. Whose responsibility is the sidewalk at that particular area, not during snowstorms?
That's in the right of way right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two classifications of sidewalk in the city. There's what's within the right of way, which is city-owned, city responsibility for maintenance and operations, which is what I believe that section is. And then there's sidewalk that's privately owned. The best thing that you can do is, I can give you my card after this, but if you go to the city website, there's a report a concern link on there, and if you put it in there, it'll go into our tracking system, and then we will have someone go out and address it. But I'll give you my card too when I finish here.
The other part of my question is, who's responsible for washing all the signs around? They're all getting, dirty and
so
mildewed.
we have a contract with King County Public Works to do that, and the determination of whether or not they get washed is done on an annual basis. And what they do is they go out and measure how reflective the signs still are, and then it determines whether or not they get either replaced, they get cleaned, or they're acceptable and they move on to the next sign.
Well, the ones I'm talking about are mostly the street signs in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's the same ones. So the same thing's true there too. So there are privately owned, like, if someone's got a private drive or something. So not all of them are the city. So without knowing specifically which ones you're talking about, I can't 100% answer that. But any of the public street roads or any stop sign that's on a city street, those ones we do.
Even the state signs are needing washing.
So the state signs, we don't, WashDOT handles them, not us. But
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, but if you see graffiti on a sign, there was a stop sign in Twin Lakes. I noticed that with the Public Works Director, we don't, those need to be fixed right away. If you see a sign that is particularly dirty, shoot us an email. We'll take care of it. I mean, that's something that we could just send somebody out. One of the other things, too, is that I remember I was walking through the area a couple of years ago, and I kept seeing signs that were down. There was I was off somewhere in Adelaide, and there was a sign that had been down. I asked the neighbor, how long has the sign been down? They said 6 months. And I'm like, God, if they've got a sign down, call us. We'll get it picked up right away. So if there's any kind of signs that are knocked down from cars or weather, we need to know that. If a sign looks really dirty and you think we should take care of it, let us know. If there's graffiti on it, we'll take care of it. That's what we do. Yes, sir.
Tony Armstrong from Twin Lakes. You have first of all, I want to congratulate you for getting the message out relative to the development. It's creating a positive affirmation about what Federal Way is and can be in the future. I guess I'd ask you, an old rule is that that we get the message right, and it sounds, based on the crowd's response to you, you're getting the message right relative to the way the community, I trust everybody agrees with that. The second rule is to get the message out.
Right.
Okay, so with regard to safe streets and drug-free environments, could you kind of recap the efforts that you may be planning or have underway to create an image, just like you're doing about the physical aspects of the development of Federal Way, but the actual safety and drug-free, the civility,
Right.
if you will, of the community?
Correct. Well, if you take a look at the Mirror tomorrow, I've got an editorial in there about this very issue, about what we're doing, our priorities, the things that we're doing. It was a response to something else, but I think it touched on this issue. So it's called I Work for You. It'll be on page 3 of the Mirror. The Mirror is a great publication, and they do a really good job of making sure that, and Bob Regner's not even still here, so he's not going to hear this, but they do a really good job of delivering our weekly news, and it's one of the first things I look at on Friday. So page 3 of the Mirror, I've got my editorial in there about what we're doing. It's called I Work for You, and which I do every day, and it's about what that means. And what it means is that we're doing everything we can do to make our city safe. So I agree completely. Our communications coordinator, Tyler, helps me with that message. And so I do think it's very important that we send that message out consistently, that we're not going to be a Seattle, we're not going to tolerate these things, and we need to engage on multiple levels. This is one such communication, making sure that this gets televised on Channel 21. And we'll probably send out a newsletter here real soon. But I think you're right. We need to make sure that we're putting out that communication. And one of the things I try to do is engage, on certain social media sites, when applicable, about what we're doing. If there's something going on, or if there's a real concern about what people are concerned about in a particular area, I try to get that message out and respond to that in real time. Misinformation is obviously sometimes a concern, and so I try to get that as well. So I think we'll continue to do that. But I think it is important to know that we are addressing this as best we can. Any other questions? Yes, Debbie.
Okay, I have a couple of things I wanted to ask about. First of all, I wanted to just, again, mention about the meeting that's coming up for the Senior Commission.
Yeah.
And how important it is for anyone who wants to come. You don't have to be a senior. And if you know anybody, your neighbors, your relatives, the more we have there, the bigger our voice is going to be, and we'll be able to share our opinions and ask for things that the city might work with us on. So again, just really important to get out there and get our voices heard. It's going to be our chance to talk.
I need to interrupt you, Debbie. It was Debbie and Debbie's a neighbor, and her friend Sue, who live across the street, that first came to my office back in December, and after a lot of emails about this. So she's really a driving force in making sure that the Senior Commission actually happened.
A pain, but.
And let's go driving force in quotes. But thank you very much. It's very important, and it's really exciting. We're going to get there.
So the meeting is the 5th, 4th?
May 4th.
May 4th?
Yeah.
At the same place we have the city council meetings.
Yeah.
So again, just let everyone we're going to be doing some communication, some advertising. So the more we can get it out there, the more people we can get to come to this meeting. Again, it gives the seniors a chance to everyone to have their voice heard and their concerns, their opinions. So I think it's great if we can do this with the city.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Second thing.
I have a couple things. One is you talked about traffic. Or someone talked about traffic lights.
Right, EJ did.
And so my question is because of where I live, the traffic light, I think it's 330th and 1st.
Yes.
It's the one between the 7-Eleven and the Cove Apartments. There are times when we leave and come down to that light, and that light doesn't turn green for like over a minute.
Yeah, EJ, this is a problem, because this is my light. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, actually, it's right. So you guys know where First Avenue and 330th is? There's a 7-Eleven there. So if you come down that hill and you sit there and you want to take a left, EJ, we're parked there sometimes. It feels like 2, 3, 4 minutes. Okay, we're gonna have Rick.
And there's no traffic.
I can tell you, we were actually on the verge of being late. It was Easter Sunday, and we were trying to get somewhere. It was my wife and my son in the car, and my wife finally says, "Hey, are you ever gonna get this thing fixed?" So, are we? This is Rick Perez, you guys.
So, yeah, city traffic engineer. So we do all the signal timing in the city. So the issue there is that the signal's coordinated on First. And when you run coordination, how long it takes to cycle through is dependent on the worst intersection on the corridor. So, okay, I'm sorry. All right, so the cycle length at a traffic signal, when it's in coordination, is dependent on the worst intersection in that corridor. So in this case, it alternates between 1st and 320th and 1st and 336th. So in order to keep them all coordinated up and down First, that's what's going to control it. So that's why the cycle length is longer than would appear to be necessary. Now, and part of the problem with the way coordination works is we have to assume that there's traffic on First, whether there is or not. Basically, it serves all the other phases. It'll gap out as soon as there's no traffic there, and all the rest of the green time goes to the coordinated corridor. And that's First Avenue. That's why it takes so darn long. The cycle length is 110 seconds. So, and that's pretty much all day. And
seems like it's longer. It almost seems like twice that.
You know, and that's a very common response.
And I think it's even on like weekends where there's hardly no traffic on the roads anywhere. And I know that you talked about, isn't there somebody that sits at a computer that maybe can look at those traffic lights and...
That's
okay.
coming real soon.
Yeah, that is. So, although not that intersection with this phase. Right. But we're working on it. Actually, we're being able to accelerate.
You know what? We're going to take, because this is a localized thing, why don't we do this? Yeah. You guys, it's 8 o'clock. We've got some folks that have been working since 8 a.m. this morning. Why don't we go ahead and call it? And then, Debbie, if you want to come up, or anybody else who wants to hear more about the traffic signaling and all that, thank you so much for coming out tonight, you guys. It's a great discussion. Here, Rick.